Hello, my friends, and welcome to the podcast where our goal is to remind you that amidst the chaos and craziness of the world today, there is still plenty of good that is worth shouting about. In each episode, we highlight the stories of another creator of good in the world. Nonprofit, for-profit, it doesn't matter. We know that when you use what you have to add to the world, we can make the world better. This is Creating Good with me, Matt Barnes. Let's create some good. Oh my goodness, it's another episode of Creating Good with Matt Barnes. Isn't it good to have me back in your potholes? I mean, come on. That's a weird thing to say. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to the show. I'm Matt, and the purpose of this show, if you didn't know, is to highlight the good being created in the world. Creating Good is a movement to mobilize people to use what they have, your talents, your resources, your connections, your experiences, everything that makes you uniquely you. Using that to create good in the world and to come together with others and do the same thing. And one of the best ways to do that is to be inspired by other people who are doing it. And that's what we're doing on this podcast. We're telling those stories. You can go to creatinggood.co and hear more about the Creating Good movement there and take the Creating Good pledge, which is just a pledge to use what you have to create good in the world. And you get a badge you can put on your website and declare to everybody that you are creating good. We are on a mission to get 50,000 people to take that pledge this year by October. So we're real excited about it. We're off to a good start. We've got a lot of really exciting things coming up to announce soon. You're going to want to be a part of all this. This podcast, again, telling the stories. And today we have a great story. So Doug Brown is our guest today. Doug has been a friend of mine for a while. He and his wife, Jessie, have an organization called Uniquely Knitted. And Uniquely Knitted works with individuals, couples, who are experiencing infertility and walking through that process with them, providing support and guidance. And it's such a huge thing. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've probably heard me talk about my wife and I going through that journey ourselves. We have a podcast called Parenting is Hard, which has been on hold for a while because parenting got hard. But we did a whole episode, actually maybe 2 episodes on our infertility journey. Doug and Jessie came on that podcast. They're amazing. They're just some of the coolest people you'll ever meet. In fact, since this episode was recorded, I have joined the board of Uniquely Knitted. I believe so much in their mission and want to make sure that it is helping people, because so many people, like, it's insane how many people are struggling with infertility and feel like they are alone in that process, that they have no one to talk to. And Uniquely Knitted wants to dispel that notion and help them know that they have support. So it's amazing. Doug's awesome. We just have a fun time when we're together. I've done his podcast. He's done ours. And I can't wait for you to hear this. I'm here with Doug Brown.
Woo!
Like, actually here in person.
That's right, yeah.
I don't get to, I do so many of these on Zoom that
my goodness,
so nice to have somebody
we should
in person.
start with a hug, maybe.
I know. Last week it was, I had somebody in person. It was the first time in, I think, 7 months.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that is a long time.
Yeah, no. The first couple months of the podcast, we did it all local people, and they were in person. And then we started going Zoom for other people, and we never really came back. So it's so nice to have somebody here. I can look at your eyes, your beautiful eyes. Okay, so if you have heard the podcast before, you know we start off every interview with a segment we call 3 random questions.
Bring it on.
I have a list of many, many random questions, and then we randomly chose 3. So here they are. Doug Brown. Have you ever been on TV or in a movie?
Oh, maybe in the background of So You Think You Can Dance.
All right. Dancing or?
No, I wish. No. I was an audience member on So You Think You Can Dance.
Okay.
I think that's it.
That's what you got.
That's what I got.
There you go. That's good.
I wish I had a cooler story.
And you're not even sure if you can see you.
I'm pretty sure you can see me.
Okay.
It was me. I'm 6 foot tall, and It was a sea of 12-year-old girls. And I don't know really why I was there.
Why were you there?
But I'm so obvious. I'm just sticking out.
Okay. So you think you can dance? Yeah, yeah. I went 1 year. Some friends got this was so long ago. Got nominated for a Grammy.
Oh wow. Okay.
And or no, not a Grammy, an American Music Award.
Okay.
So I went to the American Music Awards.
Just one of those same things
with them.
Not a Grammy.
And then they won. And so when the camera like cut to them coming out of their seats, like stepping over us, I was shocked at how many, by the time I got out of there, how many messages I had of people were like, "Did I just see you on TV?" I'm like, wow, that's my big claim to fame right there. It's in the audience.
Audience member 348.
That's right. That's right. I might as well have been a seat filler. It didn't really matter. But I was there. It was cool. The Osbournes were the hosts that year.
Oh, wow.
That's if that gives you any frame of reference for when when that happened. And I remember thinking it was funny that when I watched it back on TV, they were bleeping them because that was their thing, right?
Yeah,
the Osbournes were like so profane all the time, so we're gonna bleep. And they were bleeping them in places where they didn't say.
No way.
Yeah.
They were over bleeping.
They were way over bleeping. Because I remember sitting in the audience and being like, I think there's been they've said 3 bad words the whole time. And then I watched it back and it was like in the first 10 minutes, they bleeped them 15 times. And I'm like, they didn't even say anything.
Their PR guy was like, they're not coming across Osbourne-y enough.
More edgy. Okay. This one seems fitting and appropriate as you and I just had lunch and we're watching the Olympic procession on boats, whatever that was. If you could add a sport to the Olympics, what would it be?
Ooh, great question. I grew up surfing and skating, and I would have always said, and I always did say this, when is surfing and skating going to be in the Olympics? But I believe it is.
It is now, I think. I think they both are.
They both
right?
are. I think this is the first year that surfing is in the Olympics.
Really?
You know what I would say is, have you ever seen some of the Red Bull Flutog events, where they're the
Flutog?
Flutog.
What is this word you're saying?
Red Bull has an entire class of things where they'll you make a team and that team has to create a flying vehicle and then they push it off the pier and whoever goes the furthest wins. Have you ever seen these types of events?
This sounds great.
Or you have to make a go-kart and they send you down and it's always just chaos and
I love that.
People wipe out. I want more of this is a reputable podcast. I shouldn't. More of a Jackass style.
Yeah.
Throw someone down a hill in a golf cart. That's what I'm hoping for. I would love to see that in the Olympics.
The Olympics do seem to need a little more chaos.
A little more humor and chaos. Everything's so controlled.
A little less perfectly and precisely planned.
Yeah.
Although the boat parade entrance today may embrace that chaos. That was the most. I don't know, man. I don't know.
We've seen people run 100 meters, but I want to see someone get shot out of a cannon at 100 meters.
There you go.
See, why not?
Yeah.
With some judges?
Yes.
I'm all for it.
You've seen those memes that are like, the Olympics, it shouldn't be sending the best of every. It should be just randomly choosing people and saying, okay, we're sending you this year to represent America in this sport. Good luck. It's like a guy who has no skills at all.
We had this idea. It could have blown up. Maybe in 4 years, someone will have this idea. If you were a young person and you wanted to grow a TikTok account, we thought it would be a great idea to start a TikTok or an account, and every day that they're doing an event on the Olympics, you go all out and you get a group of some dads and there's some older people like a mom and then you race them on whatever is happening in the Olympics that day, so you can get in a comparison of. Here's a group of 40-year-old dudes who ran 100 meters in 25 seconds.
And here's a guy who did it in 7 seconds. I don't know.
Here's your local mechanic hucking a giant spear.
Because we don't really have a bar.
There's no bar.
There's no way. When you see these amazing feats of whatever, what are we comparing it to? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what I would do.
How far can you throw a javelin?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know, 5 feet maybe.
I bet you could throw it further.
Maybe I could. So when somebody throws it, I don't even know what they do. 75 feet. That seems impossible.
It does.
But if they did, then you're like, oh yeah, because I could only throw it 5. That's impressive.
Right, but you got to know that.
I have no frame of reference.
After this, we're gonna go throw some javelins
in the parking lot. Doug Brown, your final question.
Okay.
Can you do any impressions?
No, none.
Really?
And I can't even do accents.
Oh, okay.
I've tried. They fail. They all fail.
Oh, really?
We used to have this joke. We would sit around and try to all do an Irish accent or something. I'm so bad at that.
Irish is a hard one, though.
I'm so bad at that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
you know, I would embarrass myself to try to do something. You know, but can you do an Irish accent?
See,
it's vulnerable.
Irish is
it's
very
vulnerable.
hard. Irish is very hard. I do voices for the kids. Like I can do Mickey Mouse, and I can like, oh boy.
That's great. Oh my gosh.
Welcome to the podcast.
Mickey's here.
And that
that was really good.
Oh, thank you.
I'm impressed.
Thanks. Have your kids found Phineas and Ferb?
A little bit.
A little bit. So Dr. Doofenshmirtz, they have me do that one a lot.
Okay. Now you got to do it.
Perry the Platypus, what are you doing here? You know. So these are the skills that I have.
I have none of that. Whatever you just did, I have none of. None of.
But when I was, and then we'll actually get into what the podcast is about. When I was like probably 25, my grandpa died.
Oh
yeah. Let's lead with something positive.
Sorry. Yeah.
But my mom, I was living at home at the time. I just gotten out of college, and my mom was like secretly obsessed with Dr. Evil.
Oh yeah.
From Austin Powers. And so they had asked me to do his eulogy, part of his eulogy, and read the 23rd Psalm. And then so the whole week before, she'd be like, dude, it's Dr. Evil. Be like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And she would just die laughing. And so and it became this thing. Like I had to actually mentally make myself not do it the day of.
That's dangerous to practice like that.
Right. and I look out as I'm in the actual, reading it, and my cousin does the pinky finger, and I had to hold it together. It was so bad.
The last sentence comes out a little Dr.
Not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Deliver us from evil.
Man, there's a whole category of life I just don't have access to. You know?
Right. I don't know.
My kids are they're at a loss for what I can't do.
It's okay, Doug. You can do all kinds of things, like starting a nonprofit. Let's talk about that.
There you go.
All right. My first question for everybody is, first of all, you did great on the random questions.
Thank you.
I mean,
it was stressful.
Excellent. You passed. We'll keep going.
Okay.
I always tell people, I'm not sure. If you suck at that, then I might not keep the interview going. So the first thing I always ask everybody is, like, tell me your origin story. Where'd you come from?
Yeah.
How'd you get to where you are today, and what are you doing? I already know all these things, but for the people.
For the people, for the listeners, absolutely. My origin story is common in that I grew up wanting to do something that gave back to people. I always had a heart for changing the world. Maybe that's not common. I don't know. Yeah. Whatever my personality type is that's what drew me into professions was, how can I do something that is giving back and be a part of people and serving people? That was always a huge priority for me.
Sure.
That led me in some natural ways to working at a church for a really long time.
Yeah.
And then also led me to working in different nonprofits, working with kids and families. Ultimately, my own personal experience is the origin story for our nonprofit experience, which is at like late 20s, 30s, my wife and I tried to have kids, and we were not able to have kids. We both have totally profound fertility issues. I went to a doctor after about a year of trying. My wife and I wanting to be young parents. Go in, do a whole bunch of testing, and they say, there's just no way to say this, but there's no way you can have kids. It's not possible. It was like a, blow dart to the neck, sort of like, and almost pass out in the office. And it was a truly horrible experience. Going home to tell my wife that, oh, I'm the reason why it's, we haven't been able to do this. I just spent the next couple days kind of catatonic, not really sure what to do with my life. Meanwhile, my wife goes in, okay, I'll go see what's going on too. They come back, I don't know how to tell you this, there's just no way you're going to have kids. So both of us just somehow found each other in this horrible sort of Twilight Zone, horrible situation where we're fighting as much as we can to get into a place where we actually can have kids. So that led us to do all the different fertility treatments. We did everything you could do.
IUI, IVF, all the blah.
Yeah. And then each one of them just with no success whatsoever.
Sure.
At one point, we sat down with a fertility doctor and said, be honest with us. If you could put a percentage, I know they can't do that, but if you could put a percentage, he said you probably have a 2% chance, even with the fertility treatments. I was like, oh gosh, the writing's on the wall for sure. But that then, led us through the adoption and foster care process. We have 2 children, both adopted, one from just private adoption and one from foster care.
Okay.
But in the midst of that, fertility for us was a moment of crisis, a moment where the meaning of life dropped out. If you're listening to this, maybe you might want kids one day, maybe you might have kids, maybe it was a struggle for you to have kids.
Yeah.
But for all of us, I think if we were to go back to a younger version of ourselves, we had some assumption about parenting,
Yeah.
Whether it was, I don't really want to do that, or whether it was, I'm going to be a big family, I came from a big family, whatever it is, we had an idea. For me, losing that all of a sudden changed the trajectory of my life. Well, what am I supposed to do now?
Yeah.
We Jesse and I, that's my wife, Jesse. We had all, should we move to New York and, be artists? We were searching for grasping at straws to be like, what does this mean about our life? Very quickly in doing the nonprofit work that we were doing, it just became so aware that there's not enough services for that time period of life where someone has, in a way, lost or is losing their fertility. Who can they turn to? What community can they be part of to find some comfort, find some meaning, and be introduced to other people going through that? There wasn't enough services, so we immediately jumped in and said, we have to make something. We have to create something that creates community, helps people find meaning, and is scalable, and it's accessible, and it's rooted in psychology, and it's a real solution for this global, forever long process. And then that's the spark that created the fire.
And it's all been just easy going from there.
Not a single problem.
Right. That's how it normally goes. Obviously, our story. Ooh, my voice just cracked. It's puberty time all over again.
Mine too. We're so young. Is what you're trying to say.
We are so young. You guys, we're babies. Babies having babies. So my story. I've been on your podcast and shared that and just as friends, we all of that. Part of that as well, aside from just the services, and part of why there's the need for the services, aside from just, processing what you're going through and everything, is there's cultural stigmas. There's all the things around that. Like, for you to sit here and even just tell me that story, that's a rare thing. Like, people don't talk about those things like that, and yet it affects how many people?
Yeah, it's 1 in 6 people.
Right.
About 18% of the planet. That's not 1 in 6 couples.
Okay.
That's 1 in 6 people on Earth. So it's massively widespread.
Yeah. So it even though most people, they keep it to themselves, they don't talk about it, they feel alone, they feel isolated in that journey that is such a personal thing already and has so much baggage attached to it. They're not. And yet they feel it.
Yep. And that's probably our first barrier that we encountered in creating something that's a movement or a substantial kind of effort to solve that problem or confront that problem was nobody wants to talk about it.
Right.
How do you solve a problem nobody wants to talk about? It's in a lot of ways it's this big secret for everyone.
Sure.
Some people might feel more comfortable talking about it or they're more open about it, but there's no way to avoid that it's super vulnerable. And it's stigmatized.
Sure.
Everyone's heard some horrible comment or some lame piece of advice.
Yeah.
So then we're out there going, "Hey everyone, we're here to speak into this space," and everyone's like, "Cool, keep it on. Can you keep it? Shut up," essentially,
Right. So you guys started Uniquely Knitted to address that, and I think we were talking over lunch, like different nonprofits dealing with a lot of different issues. A lot of them are hard topics or society or they've become overly politicized or whatever it is. How have you guys dealt with that as far as like if it is I've told you, like, when we were going through our fertility treatments and stuff, the waiting room, everybody like just sitting around kind of keeping to themselves, like kind of timid. And I'm like, we're all here for the same thing. Like there's no secrets here. Like we're good. You don't have to be ashamed here. We're all here because, and we would, not in an intrusive way, hopefully, but we, talk to people, and it was crazy to see how at first it was like, what do I do? What do I do? And they would pretty quickly, once they realized, oh, you can have conversations. Yeah. It'd start to open up a little bit. And you realize how much they feel alone in it. It's it's the pressure of society of having kids. It's all that. But then also, you're talking about sex. You're talking about something that's personal. You're talking about something that is, for a guy, like I'm supposed to be able to do that, or a girl, a woman, I'm supposed to be able to do this just naturally, and I can't do it. So there's so many layers on there. How have you approached that as far as opening up those communication lines when really that is so much of the problem?
Absolutely. I think in any effort where you're bringing attention to something that's vulnerable and something that's stigmatized, for us, it was fertility. But I think almost by definition, the work of nonprofits, the work of these organizations they're stepping into situations that are vulnerable, that are hard to look at.
Right.
Whether it's whatever type of service you provide, generally it's a part of this whole thing that is not working the way that you would want it to in an ideal society or something, So at some level, it's like, there's that. I wish we didn't have that issue, or I wish people didn't have to experience that, or I wish people didn't have that pain. And then you're the one over there who's going to hold the flag up and go, hey, let's not forget about it.
Right.
I think at the core of that is the openness to stand in a vulnerable position and lead in vulnerability. Whether it's whatever service you're providing, but being able to stand in that situation and say, I'm not uncomfortable with the vulnerability.
Right.
I'm not uncomfortable talking about this. For us, it's, sex, trying to get pregnant, fertility things.
Sure.
I'm not afraid to say that yes, people have sex to have babies. Sometimes
right.
Sometimes they take a sample of semen and they put it into the female egg. Like,
do we need to bleep that?
I'm not afraid to say those words and say,
right.
Yes, some men have to give a sperm sample.
Yes.
And then some women have to have an egg, they donate their eggs, and sometimes they have to, connect those things. Sometimes people just have sex with medication, but it's being able to step into those conversations where people go like, ugh, and say, I'm not uncomfortable with it.
Right.
This is my life. I'm willing to be open and let you look at me and watch me be vulnerable.
So how much, because, a lot of organizations aren't necessarily run by people who have experienced the thing. So like, you might be leading a homelessness task force. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to have experienced homelessness to do that. How much does your personal experience, like you said, being vulnerable and all that, does that open those doors because you've been through it and you're being vulnerable? So does that help other people be vulnerable? Why am I having trouble with that word? Words are hard.
I think it does. I think it's a learning process to learn to sit with someone who's gone through something difficult. Sometimes you yourself have sat with someone or been the person who needs to be sat with, if that makes sense. So you have learned firsthand what it's like to struggle in those ways. But I think you can learn that by even just putting yourself in that same position.
Sure.
I think that's the task of every person who's willing to step into a vulnerable position or people need help, is to say, I'm going to first put myself in this place and get well acquainted with the suffering, right? Like you said, a homeless service task force, right? Well, you might not be as effective standing in the gap for someone who's experiencing this horrible thing if you've never really met someone experiencing that.
Right.
Jumping in and understanding what life is like from that perspective. And then here's the difficult part, having people say, hey, why don't you come with me? Why don't you join the awkwardness with me? Join the vulnerability with me. I'll lead it and I'll feel comfortable. But we have to make a connection from the person who's not seeing it to the person who is seeing it. And I think as a nonprofit leader, this is a human, we need people to stand in that gap. It doesn't just have to be a nonprofit leader, but.
Well, that's the word that was coming to mind when you were saying that was just humanity, like connecting with someone's humanity and realizing like we have this in common. We can bond over that, you know, like this thing that we all have is we're all going through life and experiencing this. If I can make myself vulnerable to connect with you in that situation, then I can learn your context. I can learn the context for your humanity and help understand that and help bring understanding to that instead of having that sort of separation of, well, you're that, I'm this.
Yeah. And I would say I think resources flow best through humanity.
Yeah.
Right? Like if we have things that people need, whether it's finances, whether it's homes, whether it's resources, education, whatever it is, that flows through a human connection best. We can always T-shirt cannon the supplies to people from, you know, in a couple neighborhoods over, but it never lands well, right? It never. The reception of that is like, well, clearly you don't even want to know me.
Right.
But you want me to have the resources. Why would you want me to have this if you never even want to know me?
It's like you don't see me as a person, you see me as a need.
Totally.
You know?
Or a problem.
A problem. Solve. Yeah.
And we see that too. You know, we will, you know, people in our community will maybe open up to a family member, open up to someone they know. Yeah, I've been struggling. It's actually been hard for us. We've been trying to get pregnant, and you get, oh, well, that sucks. Keep trying. Just try to relax.
Yeah.
You know, and it's essentially, well, I don't know what to do with that. Go away. Come back to me when you have better news.
Right.
But the humanity would say, oh, man, I'm so sorry.
Right.
What can I do? Can you just want to talk about it? And that openness, that connection is where the resources start to flow.
Yeah. That question, what can I do? Or like, how can I be here for you?
Yeah.
Like just in general in life, we're all so terrible at asking that instead of going to either I'm going to not be a part of this because it's uncomfortable, or let me try and solve all your problems when I don't have that context because I haven't even listened to you yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to solve them through my lens. Yeah. And you didn't ask me for solutions. I was, I always have to remind myself the worst advice is unsolicited advice. Like, just if they didn't ask, and then I catch myself saying, I hate unsolicited advice, but
now that I've qualified that, get ready.
Yeah, exactly. No offense, but I'm going to offend you. The things we say, right? Okay, so but Uniquely Knitted is fairly new as a nonprofit. How old?
Right, 4 years.
4 years. Okay, and I've known you throughout all of this and kind of watched and been a part of in little ways this growing out.
Yeah.
What have been some of the challenges that you've faced organizationally, or just in this mission to like grow a nonprofit? We talk a lot about on the podcast. I've talked with you a lot about the challenges that nonprofits have in culture, and we've uncharitable and all the things that go along with that. How have you experienced that, and how have you dealt with some of that?
I'll bring you into I'll be vulnerable, bring you into what my current reality is for as a nonprofit is. We started Uniquely Knitted from the most tender place in our heart. And if you're a nonprofit founder or if you love nonprofit work, there's a tenderness that brought you to the work that you do. For us, it's certainly true. But that tenderness and that love for what you've created or what you do starts to become a liability in that you cannot let it go. Yeah. And you cannot you overly protect it. Yeah. You don't let anyone in. Yeah. And you become the sole holder of this mission, of this passion. Yeah. And it's hard for people to get involved with it. It's hard for people to feel a sense of ownership with it. It's hard for it to grow. You've almost put this little plant in a glass bottle and it's bumping up against the edges everywhere it goes. For me, I think that the number one challenge that I have learned and felt throughout our nonprofit experience is the act of welcoming people in and giving them pieces of what we do to say, here, you two hold it. You hold this. You're a part of it. It's not me. It's you. It's us. Every time I hear someone talk about our organization, Uniquely Knitted, it's not just an organization, it's this movement and thing that we do. But every time I hear people talk about it and they say, we can do that. We don't need that. I'm like, it's this amazing feeling, but it's also terrifying to let people in at that level. But I think that's what the best organizations are, is that they are collections of people holding an idea, not just a 501c3 that has a tax ID number.
For sure. And I think this is often a common problem, not just across nonprofits, but anything people are passionate, small businesses, that type of thing. And it can get in the way of growth and development and all of those things. But with nonprofits, it's even more because we have this idea of, I'm supposed to do this on a shoestring budget. I'm supposed to do this. Like, so I need to do it all myself. I need to. And how has letting some of those things go been for you? And what does it sort of look like?
Personally, it's terrifying.
Sure.
It's horrible. I mean, in some ways, it's so scary to say, I want you to be a part of it too.
Yeah.
You're like, almost doubting the words as they come out. But what happens in doing so, in bringing people in, it just goes so quickly far beyond what you could ever do on your own.
Yeah.
And there's things that people come up with that you would never have thought of. And it might be something that maybe you think that you've thought of, and you shoot them down when they bring it up. But then you think about it for a second and you go, well, I've never thought about it through that lens.
Right.
And then, or even more so, they go, well, I don't want you to do it. I'm saying I'm going to go do this.
Sure.
And you go, okay, I'll go do it. And then it works. And you go, how could I never could have.
Right.
So I think it's sort of that multiplying capacity, right?
Absolutely.
It's when you add a person, it's not 2 times now, it's more than that, right? You're greater than the sum of your parts.
Yeah.
Right? If all of us who run organizations right now added 20 more people,
right,
it wouldn't be 20 times what we're doing. It would be 100 times.
Right.
It grows exponentially more than that one person.
And there's energy with that too.
There's energy with that.
You fuel off of each other, and I think one of the big things, because I've had to learn this lesson too.
Yeah.
As a small business owner, probably a lot because I came a lot from the ministry and nonprofit background, where it's like, do it all yourself. Like,
somehow that's praised,
right? Like, if you're doing all of that, hey, how about some more? And letting go. And even though as an organizational leadership person, consultant, all the things that I've done, I would tell other people, letting that stuff go is really hard.
Yeah.
But what it ends up doing is also freeing me up to do the things that I'm actually best suited to do. And it took my team last year sitting me down and going like, this is your best use of your time. None of this is a good use of your time.
Yeah.
Give these things away, and so that you can do these things. And it was amazing how much more effective I became, but also like, okay, is all that stuff getting done? You know what I mean? But but it like, and there's bumps on the road or whatever, but you learn and we have the opportunities to grow now that we would never have had if I held on to it.
We have to play what our role is, and everyone has a different role, and we have to create community in those different areas. Like for me, I know I'm not in a good space when I start to get where I'm doing 80% of the organization's admin work, you know, because I'm like, I know how to do that. We don't need to get someone to do that. I'll just do it, right? But a better version is when I create more community and say, well, why doesn't this person do this? I'll do this, you do this. And we start to divvy things up and get things done as a team. Yeah. It enables me to be the type of person, and my wife, we founded this together. It enables me and her to be the type of people that got the thing founded in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a certain personality type that we have, or certain thing that we love to do and be. That's what got the whole thing going. Mm-hmm. And that now that it's going, our gift, part of it is to bring more people in and let them use their gift to bring this whole movement to wherever it needs to go.
It ties back in. I'm just thinking about, like, would you say, I think it ties back into the idea that I'm always trying to remind people of and remind myself of leading with the why instead of the what and the where and the details, because we can get so like going back to, why did I start this? Mm-hmm. What is this about? And what is my best contribution to that? And what's going to get us to that outcome, instead of, well, I when I started it, I'm doing it all myself, and I got to just keep doing that, or I just got to be the one that's, like you said when we were having lunch, you're going to end up doing like 60% of your time is on admin work,
right? Yeah,
and you're like, I'm not an admin kind of guy. Like, that's not the best use of my time.
And I'm goofing the admin stuff up.
Right. Because it's half-assed at that, because it's all you. I mean,
I don't really know how to do it. I mean, it's not my thing.
I'm spending more time trying to figure out QuickBooks or figure out this or figure out that than just like, okay, like I could be effective during that time doing what I already know how to do and what I'm good at, and figuring out how to apply that here, than wasting it on learning something that I'm going to be not even great at.
Yeah.
and eventually I'm going to have to hire somebody to do it anyway.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You know, so why is that so hard for us?
It is so hard for us.
Like, why? I mean, because you'd think it would be so freeing, and it is. When you actually step into it, there's a big part of it that's freeing, but it's also, like you said, terrifying.
Yeah.
And
I think it's the vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think it's vulnerable to let people in at that level, because the possibility for failure now goes beyond what you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
Where if we kept all of what you do just at Matt.
Yeah.
You have control over the success or the failure. Inevitably, it would fail because you're doing so much. You would just implode in about a week.
Yeah. If I lasted that long.
But you're willing to saddle yourself with that more because the control lies within you. But if I'm like, hey, you have to rely on your team. Well, that's like, oh, well, then I have to be vulnerable enough to say this person over here might drop the ball. And that's just so scary to do, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to let go of that one admin thing that you really, someone should be doing. But you're like, but what if they don't? It's like, right. So let's process what if they don't, you know?
Well, and you go through the whole thing of like, well, it's going to take me longer to teach somebody to do it than for me just to do it. Well, the first time it is. But then you're going to start, like anything. I tell people, whenever you hire somebody, you know, the first week or two, it's going to cost you time.
Yeah.
And then if you hired the right person and they're good, then by week 3 and 4, it should probably even out. Like where you're back kind of where, you know.
Yeah.
But after week 4 or 5, like then that's when you start gaining that time, right? Like,
totally.
But you have to be okay with the onboarding time where now sometimes you get lucky, you get like real go-getter or somebody who already knows how to do that thing and they come in and, you know, it's a day or something. But if you can be okay with that, like, you got to invest some time to save some time.
Right.
You know, it's, you know, money gets money, time gets time. Like that's how it works. And if you don't invest it, you stay where you're at.
Yep. To me, there's a motivation behind why we should do this.
Yeah.
And it's that it's a kind of a philosophical idea, which is my background, by the way. But we lose meaning in isolation. So, and people don't see the meaning in something when it's an isolated situation. So if we keep our process, our organization, our passion to ourselves, it begins to exist in isolation, and the meaning of it kind of drops out. Right? We just kind of have to drum it up for ourselves.
Yeah.
You're on year 5, reminding yourself why we need home services or why we need a fertility process group or something like that. Of course we do. That's an easy yes, but you're like, I'm burnt out. Like I need to remind myself because it's all stayed within.
Sure.
But when we expand in community, meaning is created in community.
Yes.
You add one more person who's passionate about what you're doing, all of a sudden you go, this feels meaningful. Like we're doing something here. You add another person. You add another person. You had 1,000 people in a room at the same time, all passionate about the same thing. There's an energy there. About what we're doing. That's something that's meaningful. That's almost this phenomenon that's created out of the community that we have.
Yeah.
So I think that's the motivation to do that, is to say, yes, we could keep it small, right? Like for me, I could keep doing 90% of everything, or I could start adding people.
Right.
And the more I add people, the more there's this sense of, oh, something's happening. There's something meaningful is going on here. And then donors, volunteers, people from the outside go, what's going on? All these people are passionate about this.
Yes.
And now there's this I want to be a part of it. I want to join.
Yep.
And really, it sounds easy the way we're talking about it.
I know, but
but if you were to lend yourself to that idea, even just for a moment, to say, what would it look like to add more people who are passionate and spend my time bringing them in a successful way, you might create a momentum and a sense of meaning that's never existed there before.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the payoff. The thing that's holding us back, I think, is our vulnerability and our fear of trusting others people. And, you know, I've heard this too. Aren't you afraid to get more people involved because then they could vote you out, right? No one really says that, but there's always that classic fear. And I always say, well, wouldn't that be wonderful that somebody's taken such control of something that they think the best course of action would have me be not involved? I mean, I might agree with them if they're going in such a good direction. But I think that's ultimately the fear, to say, I'm going to put this thing that I love so much in other people's hands.
Yeah.
there is a sense that you have to do that well and trust the people and choose the right people. But that, in a way, becomes our work, you know?
I wonder, too, like, for me watching you, what may make this a little bit easier is that with what you're doing, there is the potential for so much more.
Yeah.
And was there a point where you realized we can't get there if I keep doing it this way?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think that's very quickly, we got to serving, 100 people at a time. I was like, this is amazing. And then we're like, well, now we can serve 1,000 people a year. But then I'm always hit over the head with, well, there's millions of people. I'm like, the numbers just don't, the math doesn't math, if that makes sense. This is not it's a scalable option. It's good, but we're not making enough of a dent. Not that we have to make a dent, but there's just so many more people hurting. And my fear of bringing people in, or my fear of letting go of any of it, is that the thing that's holding back this movement to get to that person who's not being got to.
Yeah.
And then that was so clear to me. I want to get out of the way. I will agree, though, that's not the case for every situation.
Sure.
But I do think bringing people in and having more people own something and hold something, I don't think you can go wrong with that, right?
No.
If there were 100 people caring for 100 people, I mean, that would be 1-to-1 ratio. How amazing would that be? But that rarely happens. Normally, what is it like? It's just 2 people caring for 1,000 people.
Well, but then you see the results of that. I mean, that's why like an organization like CASA exists.
Yeah.
Because the social workers are so overburdened that, they've got 30, 35 kids on their caseload. They can't even spend a day a month on each kid.
Yeah.
So CASA has to come along and go, okay, we're going to provide a single person that has been trained and approved by the courts to be a social worker just for this kid.
Yeah.
And you see the impact that has when that happens. And that is the ability to bring community together and have more, like you're saying, more people, more voices, more ability to address the needs. Because you and Jesse can only address so much,
Totally.
And like hands-on, but to empower other people and to figure out how do we grow? Because like you said, 1 in 6, infertility is not a small issue. And unfortunately, there's very few people out there doing what you're doing.
Right.
And I've told you this before, but I'm very thankful that you guys are doing what you're doing, and I'm very proud to be affiliated with it, and because it's a huge need that's not being addressed very, very much at all.
Yeah,
and I think there's a ton of potential there. So it's been really fun watching your journey. That's kind of why I was like, oh man, I got to get Doug in here because I think you have gone through a lot of the typical nonprofit startup challenges and just fallen into some of the typical nonprofit setup like pitfalls. But have worked your way through it and are finding your way toward really setting something up that can grow and be huge.
It's a process for sure. And I would say I'm like mid-process. And there's so many of us out there. And that's why I love what you guys do as well in terms of bringing us together to say, we're all mid-figuring it and ourselves out.
Yes.
And we might as well learn from one another. And a lot of it is personal development.
Sure.
I hate to say that, but
no, it is.
You wish that it would just be like figuring out QuickBooks or making the right hire. But so much of it is, who am I? What am I holding on
to?
Sure.
Well, you can't. As much as we like to separate those things out, it's all intertwined. Like when I was talking to a friend yesterday who does leadership development consulting with companies, and she's like, you go in. She's like, I've had to find other ways to use different words, but basically, like the individual personal stuff, it's all in there. It's all part of it. And if I get too touchy-feely, then they're like, whoa, like you're here to do professional development or whatever. But like you can't separate the two. Like you can do professional development all day, but if you're not addressing some of the root issues that are coming from what you're the way you were raised or whatever, then like that's not going to change unless some changes, big changes happen.
There's humans in the system
Exactly.
all the way down,
Exactly.
until we just become an army of AIs and you can program something differently.
So we've got 2 years and
It'll be a whole different podcast in 2 years.
Exactly. Well, I won't even have to be here for it. It'll be AI Matt interviewing AI Doug, and I hope they do well. Really, I do.
But it's so true that, I mean, to affect the system, well, the system is a hollow thing. It's an org chart you could print out, on Excel tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the people in all of those little Excel squares are relational, and they're human, and they have fears and anxieties. And you may hire someone to do something, but they're afraid of this.
Yes.
And so to get into it and to change anything, you're now talking about vulnerability and relationships and all. And I think that's it's really at the heart of what we're all trying to approach too in our societies, is that there's these tender, difficult things to talk and look about, whether it's caring for children in need, caring for people who have no place to go, caring for the couple who can't get pregnant. I mean, there's people who are addicted to substances, a million different things that we have created that are so good.
Yeah.
At the heart of all of them is vulnerability, and it's hard to look at, but it takes us to bravely stand in the gap and say, I'm comfortable with it. I'll lead the conversation.
Nice. Final question. What is the thing in your job that brings you the most joy?
I'll be like, how about I give you two? One that's just ridiculous, and then one that's true to my heart. The one that's true to my heart is people. I mean, seeing someone who's lacking community, or just hurting, finding someone who can be a friend, and finding someone where they go, oh man, the meaning is kind of coming back into my life. Like I see a future for myself. We did a podcast. I'll totally praise you. Just give you all the praise.
Go for it.
But we did a podcast. At the end of that podcast, you said something to the effect of, I asked you that same question, like what would be your advice to someone who's going through it? And you said, there is a life for you. It might not look the way you think it does, but there's so much goodness, and there's like humor and laughter and fun and all that good stuff. It just might be different. Yeah. And I have had so many people come back to me and just echo that back and say, everything in my life is different when it comes to family, but it's so good and it's great. And that, that Matt guy said that like it's going to be okay. And I'm learning to find my way through how difficult that change is. Yeah. But to have the hope that things are going to be okay. I'm like, there's nothing better than that. Yeah. Being with someone that's going through that. The ridiculous fun thing is that I get to do this. I would say it's just like the like spontaneity of starting a nonprofit is chaotic and crazy. Like you can do whatever you want, right? There's no rules. If you're coming from like corporate, something there, you're clocking in and all that kind of stuff. Starting a nonprofit, it'd be like midnight and your buddy's like, hey, let's redo your website. And you're like, okay. Yeah, okay. Let's go. Or everything can be broken and you can fix it in like 24 hours, Right. You're like, this isn't working. And then like you got to have some magical coffee session. Yeah, and then you're like, we fixed everything. Right. So I would say the spontaneity of it is, I love it.
And no one can tell you can't.
That's right.
Right.
Except your entire board of directors and all your volunteers.
Those guys. All those people you let come into your story. Okay. All right. Where can people find more about Uniquely Knitted and connect with you?
Yes, absolutely. You can find me at uniquelyknitted.org. So Doug at uniquelyknitted.org. Cool. Email me about anything. I'd love to connect. I believe more people should be added to everything. So
there you go.
Come and hang out with me. Uniquelyknitted.org online. You can find this there. Uniquely_knitted. On Instagram and all the social medias. We've been blessed to have social media following, which is great. Yeah. Come and check out what we're doing and hang out. Let's just be friends, ultimately.
And you have a podcast.
Right. How did I forget about that? We have a podcast called Infertility Feelings Podcast, the Infertility Feelings Podcast. You could go and listen to me and Matt talk. Yeah. We could fill your whole day. We could fill your whole day.
All Matt and Doug all the time. But that was a fun episode.
You can listen to that anywhere. But again, it's all these different channels to say the same thing, that I and we are here for you, especially if you're listening to this and you're a nonprofit person, but you also happen to be hit by like the worst thing, infertility. If that's your story, we'd love to just be friends and be connected.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, definitely check out Infertility Feelings podcast after, of course, you listen to this podcast.
Of course.
This one and then that one.
Every single one of these podcasts, yes.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for being here, coming down and hanging.
Absolutely.
It's always a good hang.
You're the best. I'll do it anytime.
All right. Creating Good with Matt Barnes is recorded at Rogue Collective in beautiful Newport Beach, California. It's hosted and executive produced by me, Matt Barnes. Post-production is by our amazing friends over at Fame, the B2B podcast agency. Writing is by Matt Barnes and Taylor Bolanos from Rogue Creatives. Creative direction and design is overseen by Corey Hill of Rogue Creatives. Theme music is composed and performed by Jared Atherton of Chapters. Huge thanks to our amazing guests for joining us this episode, and thank you to all of you incredible listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, and I would imagine you did if you're still listening, so don't forget to help us spread some good by giving us a good review. Preferably like 5 stars, lots of really nice words. It's very helpful. Also, tell your friends and subscribe so we can come straight into your potholes each and every time we have a new episode. Take the Creating Good pledge on our website at creatinggood.co. We'll catch you next time. This has been a Rogue Creatives production.